Okay, chat, we're out here foraging virgin forest. You know, all these little pine cones from these pinyon trees. So many pine cones. Gathered some up. Gonna take them home, make a pine cone epoxy bowl. I've seen a number of other creators turn pine cones in resin and wanted to try it myself since I have access to free pine cones. My experience with pinyon trees and cones is that the sap is super sticky and I didn't know how to deal with that. Some searching led to this procedure to set the resin in the cones, and it's basically bake them at around 225 degrees for about an hour and a half, and it worked like magic. As you can see here, I've decided to use some leftover Burl pieces as the base for the bowl. What I want to do, I'm using this size bowl I got from the dollar store. I've already selected some pine cones. I'm going to see if I can pick a burl that will fit this piece. Probably something like that. You can see there's some really nice color and figure in here. So I think that's going to be a good match for the reddish tones of pine cones themselves. So let's see, I'll measure this, and when we come back, we'll have a piece for the bottom. Ready, set, go. There we go, real nice little piece. Oh, should be good enough. Now, the question is, what color epoxy should I use for this? Or should I go clear? So originally I thought I would just do a pure black epoxy, but then I thought it would be nice if there was a little bit of a shimmer to it. And the blue was supposed to be just a very small hint of color in the black, but I got a little aggressive with the blue powder and ended up dumping in way too much. But I think the result turned out really nice. Okay, here we go. Hopefully I got this right. Unlike my previous epoxy volume calculation, I got this one spot on, and I did an estimate of the pinecone volume as 10% of the volume and subtracted out that wood block in the middle, and it turned out just perfect. I've got this pressure pot to help squeeze the bubbles down to invisibility, and you can see it's kind of a big fat short one, and I chose that because I really wanted to be able to do larger diameter pieces and not necessarily tall pieces. So this worked out for me. The only downside is that it does not come, or doesn't have, as far as I know, a vacuum cover so I can do stabilizing. So California Air Tools, if you're listening, I could really use one of those. Well, I struggled with getting that plastic bowl off, and it was just not worth the effort. So I'm just going to use my carbide cutter to just turn it off. And then what I'll do is I'm going to glue a block to the end here with a tenon on it, and then get to shaping. So I'm going to take that off real quick, and then we'll glue on the block. Here's the burl. So we'll get this nub off of here and glue on a block. I chiseled most of that thing off, but boy, that burl is hard. And so is the epoxy, obviously. So I'm going to use this 60 grit carbide sanding disc. I believe it's from Duragrit. I don't often have opportunity to use this, but this is definitely a good use case. Hey, that's fun. Finally get it balanced. You can get those nice little ribbons coming off of there. All right, so we got the burl coming through there. I have to cut quite a bit of this away, but avoid there anyway. So I want to get down to kind of the middle of the pine cones so you see that really cool spider pattern. Just a little bit more there. A little bit of a staining of the sapwood of the burl, which is not great, but it's an experiment, so we'll see what it looks like. Go just a little bit further here. It's looking pretty cool. Hmm. I think I have to go a lot further. The middle of these pine cones is like a half an inch in. So I think I'm going to make more of a sweeping tulip shape. Otherwise, I'm just going to end up with these dots. Ooh, the smell of that pinyon pine. Wow, that's intense. All right, got a long way to go. I am wearing my 3M Papper respirator hood for this entire process, and the only time I could smell it was when I lifted my mask to talk into the microphone, but it was super intense. There we go. That's what I want. Oh. Oh. Ah. Normally on these pieces, you have to be super conservative in how much material you take on each pass. And right there, I got a little too aggressive and got a catch, and it took out huge chunks of resin. which is unfortunate. The other thing I think that's hard to see in these pieces when you see others do them online as well is just how long they take compared to just a regular wood bowl. I would say they're probably 10 times longer between getting everything ready for the pour taking about a week, and just having to take super light cuts for the entire turning. They might seem like magic, but boy, do they take a long time. Oh man, that was actually a pinion nut. I'm gonna have to fill that. Actually, I think I like that pretty well. Just round this over a little bit. Another thing you can see about resin turning is in these shots is just the astonishing mess this creates compared to a wood turning. You can see that all these shavings stick to all these surfaces. So when you cut them off, they end up with an electrostatic charge. So they stick to absolutely everything, including any kind of brush you use to brush them off. So cleanup is another disaster. So that's another reason why I go a long time in between doing resin turnings, is it allows me to forget how unpleasant the cleaning process is. I've done a number of resin projects now, including several epoxy river tables. And one thing I learned when I was doing those and doing the sanding, I think I got it from Cam at Blacktail Studio, and I think he got it from the epoxy manufacturer, and that is to clean the piece with alcohol in between grits. And I think what that does is it keeps those resin particles from marring your finish when you move to the next finer grit. And I found that actually works quite well. Plus it gives me an idea how the finished piece is going to end up looking. Another thing I learned when I started doing these projects is drilling out the center to do the hollowing. At first, when I saw other people, turners, doing this, I thought, you know what, that's just lazy. Just turn it away. It's not that big a deal. I always find hollowing to be the fun part anyway. And then I turned my first resin piece, and boy, did I become a believer of using a Forstner bit to hollow out resin, just because you do have to take those tiny, tiny passes, and it would just take forever if you tried to turn all of it away. So that's why I do that, and it saves a ton of time and makes the whole process a little more enjoyable. Almost there. Trying to decide whether to undercut this. I think I will do just a little bit. Widen that out. I'll have to switch to this gooseneck feather, I think. So I'll swap that out and be right back. All right, that is deep enough and hollow enough. Just gonna clean up my cuts here a little bit and then sand it. All right, I'm gonna call that done. Time for lunch, and then we'll sand and finish. I choose to do a lacquer finish on this piece for a number of reasons, one of which is it's super fast to do multiple coats in a single day. You only have to wait 30 minutes. And it also tends to fill in and hide any small scratches that you may have missed in sanding, which you could see there on the bottom. I didn't really have a good way of getting a perfect sanded finish on the bottom. Another thing I learned the hard way on a previous project using a lacquer finish was that you really need to wait about 3 weeks or maybe even longer for the lacquer to fully cure before you can do any buffing or polishing. If you don't, there's still solvents escaping from the finish, and you could end up with gloppy and splotchy results. And that's what happened to the previous project where I tried that. So it was kind of excruciating to wait that long to do it, but it was totally worth it because the buffing with the polishing pastes really made that lacquer finish super smooth and flawless. I've got the close-up glamour shots of this piece coming up in just a second because it's just about done here. And I really appreciate it if you stayed around and you're still watching. It means a lot to me and really helps the channel. And if you're not subscribed and you made it this far, I would appreciate it if you maybe hit that subscribe and notification button. And thanks for watching.